Hello, I'm Michael Kurland, CEO and co-founder of Branded Group, an award-winning facility maintenance and construction management company that services multi-site commercial properties such as retail, restaurants, healthcare facilities, and educational institutions. Welcome to the Be Better podcast. Each week, I interview thought leaders from a variety of industries who will share their stories and the lessons they learn as they strive to be better for their clients, partners, employees, and their community. Are you ready to be better? Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Be Better podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kurland. Joining me today, Kian Gohar, best-selling author of Competing in the New World of Work and founder of Geolab. Kian, welcome to the show. Tell the audience a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael. It's a real pleasure to be here with your audience and your community. I'm a futurist by training. What that means is I help individuals and organizations think about what the future might be for their organizations and industries and design different ways to help them get there. My firm, Geolab, is a innovation research and leadership training firm. So we develop models for what the future may look like, and then we help organizations and their executive teams lean into that and develop high-performing teams that they can grow quickly in a world of uncertainty and opportunity.
Yeah, I've never had a futurist on the show before, and I am real excited to have you on here. I think that we have a lot to talk about today. I'd like to start with kind of your background. Tell the audience a little bit about how you got to where you're at. Start a little bit with pure action sports, and then let's talk about X Prize, because that is exciting stuff right there.
Yeah, well, I'll start up with this, Michael. I've never had a job that I've applied for, and I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, which means every job or opportunity I've created has been something that I've created from scratch. And so that's just in my DNA. I've been an innovator my entire life, first as an entrepreneur, as a venture capitalist, and then in terms of the firm that I run now, helping people and executive teams learn about the future and become better at it. And so that's just a little context for my background. I was in venture capital early on in my career and decided that I really wanted to be on the other side of the table and actually operate a business. And so I joined a very early stage company called Pure Action Sports in South Florida back in 2005, which was disrupting the world of kitesurfing equipment. And that was a very staid industry. And we developed a business model that was very, very revolutionary for the time. You know, this is 17 years ago. We went on the cloud and we were working remotely, and we had a very distributed sales force, and we were going direct to consumer. So all of the things that we've known for the last 10 plus years of the consumer internet age, we were doing back in 2005. And I did that for 5 years, and it was a wonderful opportunity to meet people from literally all walks of life, all beaches across the world, and really get my hands wet and dirty in a fast-growing business, which I loved. And after 5 years of that, I really wanted to double down in some of the things that I'm very passionate about. I'm a very mission-driven individual, and so I wanted to marry the experience I had as an entrepreneur in building businesses with trying to solve big problems for the world. And I had moved back to Los Angeles, where I'm originally from, and I was looking for the next business to build. And I actually ended up meeting the founder of the X Prize Foundation, a gentleman by the name of Peter Diamandis. And Peter and I met, and we instantly got along like a house on fire. And Peter said to me, don't go build another business. Why don't you come and help build a business with me here at the X Prize? So maybe I can tell you a little bit about the X Prize Foundation. It is a technology nonprofit based in LA that tries to solve the world's grand challenges using an incentive competition model. What that means is they put together competitions and they raise money like $10 million, and whoever can solve for X ends up winning that prize. And the most well-known X Prize was the first one, which was a $10 million competition to build a spaceship. It was launched in 1996, and up until that point, it was basically only governments like NASA agencies that had gone to outer space. And Peter really wanted to open up the space frontier to private aviation. And so launched the competition that was $10 million. 8 years later, it was won by a company that ultimately became Virgin Galactic. And the winning of that first X Prize in 2004 has opened up the space frontier to private travel, and which is now, as you can imagine, a very busy space with lots of different competitors from SpaceX to Blue Origin and others. And so the X Prize Foundation really catalyzed this launch. And for many years, the foundation developed other competitions to solve problems in education and healthcare and environment, and really trying to crowdsource the world's genius to solve for these problems. And so I was an executive director at the X Prize, and I started a new initiative to help take all of these understanding of technology and innovation and disruption, and help corporations around the world to better understand how to do that using AI and these advanced technologies coming down the tech labs. So I did that for the better part of the last decade, and it again was a fascinating experience, personally and professionally and career-wise, to marry people who are passionate about impact and passionate about technology and passionate about entrepreneurship. And so that's a little bit about my journey over the last 2 decades until I started my own innovation advisory firm.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. That's awesome. Got a couple questions for you. First and foremost, are you yourself a kite surfer?
I am not anymore. I will say that I am a complete klutz, and kitesurfing was not the most well-suited activity for my athletic genes. I did have an injury, snow kiting actually, which is basically kitesurfing on snow on flatlands, and it's a lot of fun, but it also hurts if you crash, and I crashed pretty bad on a patch of ice and broke some things that I can't mention on air. And I decided, for my own sanity and physical safety, it's better if I stay away from extreme sports. And so I'm very passionate about the people I met in that industry, and they're just full of heart. And it was just a real pleasure. And if you had asked me at any time in my life if I would work at a kitesurfing company, I would have never have believed you.
Yeah, that I've seen it out here in California, in Newport, when it's really busy. You'll catch some kite surfers out there, and I'm like, I would not do that. You're catching like 20 feet of air off that wave, and but
you can also just ride back and forth. And we were really ahead of our time in terms of developing technology to make it a lot safer. And as a result, what we did at Pure Action Sports, we had a brand called Best Kiteboarding. And we were able to lower the price point of people to get into the sport and make it a lot safer. And for a few years in the mid 2000s, kitesurfing was the fastest growing sport in the world. And that was really something that was a function of the work that we did at Pure Action Sports. And fast forward 10 years later, and you see now these new technologies being deployed in that world, and it's even safer now, and it's easier, and it's still really fun. And I'll be honest with you, Michael. Anytime I see kites up in the air on any beach around the world, I just have an instant grin on my face, because I just have really good memories of helping build that business.
That's awesome. And the other thing that I wanted to ask, so you said you've never had a job you've applied for. Have you always just marched to the tune of your own drummer, just kind of like done your own thing, zigged when everyone else was zagging?
I think my mother would say that definitely has been the case since I've been 7 years old. And let me clarify, I have applied for a lot of jobs. I've just never gotten any of them. And so as a result of not getting them, I just had to create my own path. And so there was no option. And I'll just tell you a funny story. A dear friend of mine is a corporate recruiter. And I was speaking with her a couple of years ago, and I was sharing this story with her. And I said, I've never been recruited for a job. And she said to me, Kian, well, why would they recruit you? And I said, what do you mean? I'm qualified. I've got all these credentials. I've got a lot of experience. And she says, Kian, you're a unicorn. When people come to recruiting and try to find somebody, they're not looking for a unicorn that can be a jack of all trades. They're looking for a very specific function. And your skills are just much broader than that. And so that made a lot of sense to me. And so because of just the way I've been, I've always had to find my own opportunities. And that means networking heavily to understand who is doing what, and then approaching them, developing a relationship with them, and seeing if there's stuff that we can create together and collaborate. And as a result of that, I've created new jobs and new roles and new businesses from within my career. And that's just how I've been, because I've never fit into a box. And I'm okay with that now. Mid-career, at mid-age and knowing that I don't fit into a box.
I think fitting into a box is boring, and I think being a unicorn is way more fun. Just personal experience as well. So before we move on, I got to ask you one more question. We talked about the X Prize space launch that became Virgin Galactic, but what was the favorite X Prize that you worked on that didn't get as much hype as launching into space? There's got to be some cool stuff that you've seen in your time.
There's one that's actually still a live competition, and it's actually very hard to do. So back in 2017, I was working with a major Japanese airline. Working would not be the right word. I was having a conversation with them, and I was helping them think about how these new technologies of automation and AI can disrupt every industry. And they said to me, Kian, we are an airline company. We transport people from place A to place B. We're never going to disrupt it. We're always going to have a business. And I said to them, well, have you considered the world of virtual reality? Because virtual reality allows you to experience things and go places where you physically can't necessarily go to. And so if somebody is flying from Tokyo to Paris to go to the Louvre Museum, what if they're able to go visit the museum on virtual reality? Is that going to be potentially disruptive to your business? And the executives of this major Japanese airline, their jaws just dropped, and they said, oh my God, we need to figure out how to think about this world of new user experiences that might disrupt our business. So as a result of that, they worked with us. This is a Japanese airline, ANA. We launched a $10 million competition to create a robotic avatar. And the idea for this robotic avatar came from the early stages of, in the early 2011s, there was the massive Japanese tsunami, which led to the destruction of the nuclear plant in Japan. And there was a very difficult time to clean up that nuclear plant. And so the idea was, can we create a robotic avatar, which is controlled by a human in a remote environment? And so this avatar is like a physical robot. It's not autonomous, but this robotic avatar would be controlled by a human from a remote environment. And the avatar would have to go into danger zones or areas that have been destroyed or areas that are very difficult to reach, and be able to actually, for example, do these skills of lifting a small child and bringing it to safety, or bringing some medicine to an elderly patient that can't be removed for whatever reason it is. And so this idea to really create a brand new interface of how we communicate with each other, not just virtually in VR, or even right now we are on teleconference, but rather, can you morph your body into a robotic avatar suit and be able to control that from the other side of the planet and accomplish a certain task? And so this competition is still live. It'll be awarded soon. And I'm really proud to have really pushed this corporation who sponsored this X Prize to really push the boundaries of what robots and humans can do to live in this new bionic age.
That's awesome. And the first thing that came to my mind was, diffusing a bomb, right? I'm sure you could probably do that. I mean, I know they have robots that do it now, but if you could have a human do it and then take away some of that error, then
well, exactly. So it's actually the really cool thing is that we're entering a new world where humans are living side by side with robots, and so it's called the bionic age. And it's not. I don't believe in this like fear factor of robots, taking over our jobs or taking over our planet. Even though I've seen some pretty cool robots. I also know there are massive limitations.
Yes,
exactly. And so the real value here is helping augment our way to actually get things done better. And so robots, they can right now defuse some bombs, but we don't ever want humans to be defusing bombs, right? Because that's very dangerous.
Right.
So how can we think about taking the skills that we have as a human to be able to then use a robot remotely to defuse it? And that's being used now. And so I'm pretty excited about this particular prize because I think it's just going to really change our perception of time and space and how we as humans can interact with each other. So this is like really far out stuff, but I love it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely the way the world's going, right? I've seen the videos. I'm sure some of the audience has seen the videos on YouTube of the robot that can't miss a 3-point shot and the robot that was like it's like a tactical army robot that was shooting and ducking and rolling, and I was like, oh man, that scared me a little bit. But
it is. But
got to get used to the future.
Well, yes, and that's a lot of propaganda and marketing. This morning, I'm here in Silicon Valley
Sure.
today, and I was at SRI, which is the Stanford Research Institute International, and they develop a lot of these humanoid robots for the government, and also for corporations and research organizations. And they were showing us some of these robots, and the reality is that their battery lives are so short. Like they have 18 minutes of battery life before the humanoid robot just totally like drops down. And so these things that we see on YouTube in terms of robots doing all these cool tricks, that is very much in a controlled environment, and it's still very hard to translate that into a fully three-dimensional world. But fast forward 10 years, I think there's going to be a lot more of that we see side by side with humans.
Yeah, totally. So awesome. I think that's been fun to talk about thus far, but let's get into the meat and potatoes here. So you wrote a book, a Wall Street Journal best-selling book called Competing in the New World of Work. And as we spoke pre-show, you spent pretty much the time of the pandemic, not huddled inside like a lot of us, but you were working with Harvard on a major research project, right? So let's talk about that. Let's tell the audience about that, like where this research project came, how it spawned into the book, and everything you learned, because this is fascinating.
Yeah. So, for the better part of the last decade, as I mentioned, I've been helping organizations think about the future. And we have these exponential technologies that are disrupting every industry, from AI to automation to robotics to 3D printing, et cetera. And about 2015, 2016, I came to the conclusion that the best way for us to compete in the world of exponential technology is to double down on those characteristics which give humans competitive advantage versus technology. And those areas are collaboration, problem solving, empathy, innovation, creativity. And so I started really focusing a lot my research away from looking at the world of exponential technology and to the world of exponential teams. And what does it mean to create a team that can accomplish anything and they don't understand the word impossible? And so I've spent the last 4 years really helping change behaviors at some of the most well-known companies in the world, some of the fastest growing startups in the world, and helping them develop these high-performing teams and what it means to thrive and win. And in March 2020, obviously we all were given a shock to the system, and I have a bunch of clients, and nobody knew how to work remotely from home. And my dear friend Keith Ferrazzi, who I've known for over a decade, and we've collaborated a lot before, and he's like the world's top executive coach for Fortune 50 companies. He called me up and he said, "We got to figure this out." And so we got to help our clients. And so we started having a series of town halls on Zoom, and we would invite specific functions, like one town hall for CFOs, one town hall for chief HR officers, one town hall for like chief learning officers, one town hall for CTOs. And we were trying to crowdsource in real time during March, April, May of 2020, when everybody was in lockdown, to help them with best practices from their peers as to how to survive and thrive. And we thought that was going to be a 2-month research project, and it turned into a 2-year research project. And in the summer of 2020, we realized that the world of work was never going to be the same again. So we reached out to Harvard and we said, let's explore how the world of business is changing right now, and let's do a research project together. And they were very gracious and funded it. And for the next 18 months, we interviewed over 2,000 executives and entrepreneurs and leaders and change makers from over 300 companies across the world to really better understand what they were doing in real time to change their leadership teams and to thrive in this world of uncertainty. And on the back of that is the book that just got published 2 months ago, Competing in the New World of Work. And it's been very successful because every company or organization is trying to figure out what does it mean now to lead in this post-pandemic environment where we have to think about resilience and hybrid work world and remote world and retention. And so all the research we did for the last 2 years has really become very handy. We're proud of that. I would say that if you had asked me 2 years ago if I had turned this into a book, I wouldn't have believed it, because I really thought it was just a 2-month research project. But So that's how it all became a thing. And in the book, we took all these 2,000 interviews and we pattern matched them into 4 key categories that we believe every team can really excel at to be able to thrive in a world that's constantly changing. And we call this muscle radical adaptability. And these 4 things that underpin that are going to sound fairly common or some basic to your audience and to most audiences, but actually doing them in practice on a repeated basis is hard to do. So let me tell you what these 4 are. One is foresight, the ability to be able to look around corners and better predict what the future may bring. And this is a skill that most teams, most companies don't have internally, but I can teach that to organizations based on the last 10 years of me being a futurist through a very systematic process to figure out what are the likely situations for their organization that they might face. That's the first one. The second one is agility. How do you run a very agile team and experiment? Now, in the early days of the crisis, if you remember, we didn't know what was going to happen next. And so it was common to put your team together and say, Johnny, you go do this. Melissa, you do this. Tom, you do this. Let's reconvene tomorrow and figure out what to do next. That is a form of crisis management, but it doesn't happen on a day-to-day basis in the real practice of the world. And so we wanted to figure out what are the best practices from that crisis agile management that you can experiment on a consistent basis and be able to figure out how do you find the right fit in this new world. Now, doing all these experiments is exhausting, and I know the last 2 years have been tiring for a lot of teams. And here's the third one that teams have to be really good at, which is resilience. And what we mean by that is how do you make sure that your team is capable of co-elevating and lifting everybody up to make sure that they're crossing the finish line together? Because we come to resilience every day through work with different levels of it. Some people have more financial resilience. Some people have more social resilience. So how do you make sure as a leader, your team is fully resilient? And the fourth thing that we really double down on, we think every team has to be really good at, is this notion of collaboration and inclusion. And we learned in the pandemic that collaboration isn't about where you work, but how you work and how you show up to work and how you create teams that are crowdsourcing solutions to your problems and bringing in voices from different backgrounds to really solve for that. And so these are the 4 things that we understood that every team has to be really good at in order to thrive in this post-pandemic world.
Yeah, that is a lot, again, to unpack. And like you said, it's really kind of, I don't want to say basic, but basic words, basic thoughts, right? But you put those all 4 of those things together. If you're not doing one of them, then I'm sure it's a problem, right? And that's where, I mean, I wrote them down over here with this radical adaptability, and I can tell you, from my point of view, what made us have success during the pandemic and over the course of the 8 years that we've been in business is foresight, right? We've never had the mentality of we've always done it this way, so we're going to keep doing this way because it's worked, right? We've learned in the beginning, like we serviced the cannabis industry for brick and mortar. And when it first came out, everyone was like, oh, that's taboo. Oh, don't touch the cannabis industry. And we were like, you know what? This is here to stay, and we're gonna service it because we think that it's going to help us get a new revenue stream in the door. And now we're one of the top servicers of the cannabis industry in the space. So if we had said, hey, we won't do that because we don't know if the money is going to go because it's not federally legal or whatever, the same issues they're still dealing with, we may have lost out on millions of dollars, right?
I love that. I love that. Can I ask you a question on that, Michael? So what
sure, of course.
Knowing, having this idea that, this is a new industry that is emerging and now you wanted to provide, services to that. What do you think was the key to deciding to actually go down that path? Besides the business model, you had to take a leap of faith. And I'd love to learn from you, what was that leap of faith from a leadership perspective that said, I'm gonna go after my hunch and not be restrained by old ways of thinking?
So it's kind of funny because we'll circle back to the zig when everyone else is zagging, right? So my industry at that time, I was mid-30s when I started talking to these cannabis retailers, and it was just getting approved on a state level. But take out the fact that federally it's still not approved, and it wasn't at the time. It was still taboo. and a lot of our to certain people, right? And a lot of our competitors were run by older people that it was way more taboo than it was to someone of my age range. And I said, I think a lot of these people are going to say no because they're worried about how it's going to look on the outside, if they're going to get paid right, and how they feel about it, possibly in terms of their mental thought process, if it's, wrong, quote unquote. And I was like, I think this is a real opportunity for us to establish ourselves as someone that's going to be at the forefront. And I was right. So we handle, I don't know if we are the top cannabis facility management company in America, but I can guesstimate we're probably in the top 10% of facility management companies handling cannabis retailers.
I love how you leaned into the taboo. And that, I think, is a really excellent lesson, which we share in our book, Competing in a New World of Work, and this chapter on foresight. And one of the things that we suggest for companies and organizations and teams of any size for them to learn this practice of foresight is to find the edges of a domain, find the areas where there might be a little bit of risque or taboo, and do research on that. Because more than likely, those are the areas that are going to be at the forefront of that industry in 3, 5, 10 years' time. And what's taboo now won't be necessarily taboo in 3 or 5 years' time. And so I love how you brought up that example. And so I always tell people, if you're trying to figure out where the edges of your organization or your business is going to go find the most interesting edges, most interesting taboos, or the most interesting researchers in your particular space and follow them on LinkedIn, follow them on Twitter, read periodicals that are the edges of those domains and are kind of talking about like really edgy taboo kinds of things. Because that's where the mainstream ultimately comes from, and that's where as a business owner, the opportunity is to think about how can I identify the leading edges of something now before my competitors get into it. And so I love how you did that and leaned into what you thought was taboo, because that actually ended up becoming the mainstream.
Yeah, thanks. I guess I got the foresight box checked. So tell me, where do you think we are going with all these four tenets of radical adaptability? Where do you think we're going in the next 5-10 years?
I think we have learned in the pandemic, it just basically reassessed all our assumptions about how we live, how we work, how we learn, how we socialize, etc. And it has really changed our expectations of how we want to live. And we want to live more purposefully. We stopped being friends with some people. We have doubled down on some things that we really care about in the last 2 years. And I think it's been a huge inflection point in the world. And more than likely, we still won't see all the after effects of the pandemic world and the pandemic economy and this grand social experiment we're on for a couple more years until the other shoe drops. But I'm pretty confident that we are going into a world where people want to be heard, people want to be included, people want to be involved in decision making. And when I say people, I mean not only just general population, but employees at companies and organizations, because we've realized that the best ideas oftentimes are within our organizations. But in the past, we've always been so focused on who's sitting next to you in the office, or who you want into the hallway, or if you're the CEO, who do you invite into the boardroom? And the reality is that we have all these digital tools now to really change how we collaborate, how we communicate. So rather than trying to repaint the old car that we have of what we call work, why not use the spaceship that we have that's sitting in the garage with all these digital tools that allow us to collaborate with people from on the other side of the planet in a very effective kind of way. So all this to say is, I think the world is becoming flatter in terms of communication and collaboration and work. And that is, I think, a beautiful thing. At the same time, we're also seeing some challenges, and the world is being divided in terms of regions of certain spheres of influence and how some countries will collaborate with each other and not the others. But I'm really optimistic that this will be ultimately an era of abundance for people who think about not just returning to the ways of they used to think, but rather incorporating all these innovations that we've learned in the last 2 years, and really leaning into maximizing inclusion, maximizing collaboration, maximizing innovation using all these digital tools. I'm really excited.
Yeah, and I like what you said about inclusion. I manage the excuse me, I manage the sales team still for Branded Group, and I'm not out on the road. I'm not pounding the phones. I'm not sending emails every day. So when it comes to deciding what software we want to use, or what technology, or what new cutting edge thing do we want to try, I rely on my team and I let them make the call. I mean, within reason, obviously. If it's like $1 million, no, we're not going to do that. But we'll try something if it's something that they feel strongly about. And they just switched the platform from one company to another, and it was just based on purely on what they wanted. I didn't have anything to do with it other than green lighting them, because they came to me and said, we want to go from this product to this product, and it's because it does these 7 things differently. So I love the inclusion. I love the collaboration.
Yeah, it's you did a great job on that, because you leaned into the people who know the most about the problem that they're trying to solve for, and they're closest to it. And so one of the things that I think is also a huge trend over this next decade is we're moving towards an economy where we're going to have fewer centralized platforms. And what I mean by that is people will have the ability to interact with each other, transact with each other more peer-to-peer and directly. And because of these democratized technologies like AI, like blockchain, like these things that allow us to really have more empowerment in our lives. And so people want to be included. They want to use that. The cost of technology for these things is very low. And when the cost is very low, everybody has access to it. And so everybody can be an influencer, or can have a YouTube channel, or can create the next best startup invention. And so we're seeing, I think, a world where people want maximum inclusion, maximum belonging, maximum opportunity to be able to solve for problems. And that, I think, as a meta macro trend is beautiful for the world.
Definitely. Well, Kian, it has been great having you on the show. It's been great conversation. Let the audience know how they can get a hold of you.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's been a real joy for me to have this conversation with you as well. You can follow me on Twitter or on Instagram, both at From the KGB, which happens to be the world's worst Twitter handle at this point. But I've had it for 10 plus years, and it's just my initials. And so again, it's at From the KGB, and I'm on LinkedIn as well. And if you want to check out the book, you can go to leadersguide.org. Again, leadersguide.org, and it'll take you to this book, Competing in the New World of Work. Thank you so much, Michael, for having me. It's been a real joy.
Yeah, thank you. And audience, go pick up that book. And until next time. Thank you for tuning in. I hope that today's episode inspired you to become a purpose-driven leader in your career or your community. There's no doubt that when we lead with purpose, we can change lives. If you enjoyed today's show, I'd be grateful if you would take a moment to rate us on your preferred listening platform. To learn more about Branded Group's Be Better experience and how we provide industry-leading, on-demand facility maintenance, construction management, and special project implementation, visit us at www.branded-group.com. Be sure to follow us on social media, and you can also reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. Until next time, be better.
This podcast was produced by Heartcast Media.